Noon, so why don't we go ahead and call the meeting to order. First off, I just want to thank everybody for coming and attending. A little bit of Zoom etiquette. If you would, we'd like to have everybody mute their microphones until we get into the Q&A period, or if you need to pop in and ask a question later, you can do that, but that way we won't get any background noises interfering with the speaker presentation. And let's see, let me put something up here if I can. Hopefully. Yeah, let's see, do I have it? Oh yeah, here we go. Oh, okay. Hang on a minute. You're doing it to me again. Yeah, let me stop that for a minute. Okay. Let's try this puppy again. Share. There we go. Has everybody got the submarine with the U.S. flag flying? Okay, great. Let's go ahead and stand up and do the Pledge of Allegiance, if you would. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Yay. Let's see. So I wanted to kick off with our announcement. So welcome to our December lunch, quote unquote luncheon in professional form. As you're all aware, we're since June, we've been going with a Zoom format, which has some pluses and minuses. The plus is obviously we were able to get Admiral Ishee from Omaha, which we wouldn't have been able to do if he was having to attend in person. We're also able to get some of our members from outside the area. I see Captain Dixon has been able to join us from Baton Rouge. So, welcome to you, Captain Dixon. Also in attendance today, we have the new base commander, Captain Kenneth Franklin. Let's see, I saw Captain Franklin on. Did you want to pop in and say hello, Captain? Or do we have him still?
I'm still here.
Oh, okay.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's tough when I'm looking at 36 pictures to figure out where you are. Good. Well, welcome to San Diego, belated. Sorry we haven't been able to get together with you in person, but hopefully your ocean view will be open sometime next year and we'll be able to get back in and conduct the meetings on base again.
Yeah, we're all looking forward to getting back to normal.
Yeah. Let's see. Got some sad news to report. That another one of our stalwart members of the chapter has passed away. The Reverend Dr. Bob Crafts passed away on the same day as Vice Admiral Nicholson. But Charlie didn't learn about it until a little bit later and brought us up to speed. So Bob often gave our invocations, and before he joined the ministry, he was a doctor on the early Polaris patrols out of Hollylock and rode USS Abraham Lincoln for several patrols. We will certainly miss both Bob and Vice Admiral Nicholson. Since Admiral Ishee is coming to us from an Air Force base, it's probably appropriate that we Also mention that Major General Chuck Yeager passed away yesterday. I'm sure almost everybody knows that Chuck broke the sound barrier, was probably one of the more colorful pilots you'll ever read about. Also, since yesterday was Pearl Harbor Day, I thought we might take a moment of silence to remember all the people that lost their lives in that terrific battle. Okay.
44.
Just got a ping that Admiral Ishee's gift is arriving shortly. Let's see. See, also in attendance, so we've got 2 former Squadron 11 Commodores. In addition to Admiral Ishee, we have Gene Doyle, who's back in town and running the civilian side of Undersea Rescue Center now, right, Gene? And it looks like you're in the office, aren't you? Or are you at home?
No, I'm in the office, Bruce. Thanks. It's all good.
Good to have you back in town. And I guess URC had their change of command yesterday, correct? Were you able to go ahead and attend?
Yeah, it was somewhat of a surreal event when there was literally 4 people in attendance outside of the immediate family members and the few folks that were supporting the event.
Yeah, so we're definitely looking forward to the days when things get back a little more to normal. Let's see, a couple other announcements. Naval Submarine League has initiated a mentoring program to link individual members up either with younger Naval Submarine League members or active duty members who are interested in interacting with former submariners on professional or personal topics. Charlie in the previous newsletters provided the links to that, and we'll continue to do that. You can also go to our website and get the links to that. We hear from the active duty that they're interested in pursuing that, so I encourage you to check out that site, and if you're interested in doing some mentoring, participate in that. The annual Naval Submarine League Symposium was last month. Unfortunately, due to current circumstances, it was held virtually. So we missed a lot of the interaction, but had fairly good attendance, I think, overall to the virtual sessions. NSL has provided the ability to sign up for the symposium after the fact and be able to view the videos until the end of the month. And we'll put a link to that up. Unfortunately, the good news is they're charging less than they did when for the full symposium before the symposium. The bad news is it's still 120 bucks that they want to watch the videos from the symposium. Although active duty, I think, is free. So you may want to wait until the submarine review comes out on that. Let's see, next month's meeting, we've invited Rear Admiral Blake Converse, ComSub back, to be our January speaker. And so we're waiting to get confirmation on whether he's available for that or not. And we continue to monitor the state of the COVID pandemic, and we'll continue to recommend it. We're continuing to recommend adherence to the CDC guidelines. Wear the mask, hang in there until the vaccine comes out, and then hopefully we'll be getting back into ocean view before too long. Let's see, anybody else have any announcements they want to bring up? No? Any old business? Any other new business? Let's see, I got a couple of chat things. Let me see.
Wow.
Okay. Nothing on that addresses that. Okay, well, let's get on to our speaker. Let me put up another, see if I can do another screen share shot.
Okay.
Yeah,
You're
hang
gonna
on.
have to ship it all the way down.
Let me scratch that for a minute. Let's see if this guy will work for me. So everybody got a picture of a submarine underwater?
Yes.
Okay, great. So this is Key West off Pearl Harbor. And as I understand, Key West is currently docked at Naval Base Point Loma, having just been in ARCO for a while. So it's an appropriate background for the introduction of our speaker. I think most of you probably know our speaker. He's spoken to us several times. Most recently in February when he was in 97 in town in San Diego. So let me go through his background quickly. He's a native of Danielsville, Georgia, and a graduate of the University of Georgia in 1987, where he majored in mathematics and computer science. He was commissioned in 1988 after attending OCS in Newport, Rhode Island. His sea tours included assignments on board submarines Narwhal, Sea Devil. He was the engineering officer on Tunny and the XO on La Jolla. So that gives us two La Jolla XOs. Brian Dixon is also a La Jolla XO. And of course, we've got Jeff Fishbeck, who was the La Jolla CO. So La Jolla's given us a few members that have been great for our organization. He commanded Key West, the submarine we're looking at. And then while in command, the crew was awarded the Navy Commendation, Navy Unit Commendation, U.S. Pacific Fleet Arleigh Burke Trophy, and Battle Efficiency Award. His tours ashore include Assistant Professor of Naval Science at the University of Texas, where he also picked up a Master of Science degree in Electrical Engineering. He was the engineer and executive officer of the moored training ship 626, the former USS Daniel Webster, the executive officer to the deputy commander US PAC Fleet, director of intelligence and special operations for ComSub PAC, director of operations for Commander Submarine Group 7 and Task Force 5474, and senior advisor to the Secretary of Defense for US Pacific Command plans. After he was the Commodore at Squadron 11, he made a hasty exit to the Pentagon to be the executive assistant to the CNO for a year or so, I think. Following that, he was selected for Flag and assigned as Deputy Commander, Joint Functional Component Command, Global Strike at Stratcom in Omaha. He was, following that assignment, he was the N3 Director of Operations at U.S. Naval Forces Europe, Africa, and also concurrently Deputy Commander U.S. 6th Fleet and Commander Submarine Group 8 in Naples. Prior to his current assignment, he was the N97 at the Pentagon. I should have mentioned that he picked up a master's in security studies from the Air Warfare College, which I guess has put him in good stead since he's been spending some time in airplanes with all his tours on the Air Force bases. Decorations include the Defense Superior Service Medal, Legion of Merit, Meritorious Service Medal, Navy Commendation Medal, and the Navy Achievement Medal. So if anybody has any questions for Admiral Ishee, they will be addressed after the Admiral's talk. Just type them into the chat to chat all, and then we'll pick them up afterwards. So let me go ahead and stop the sharing. And Admiral Ishee, are you ready to go?
Yeah, Bruce, can you hear me okay?
I can.
Can you see me okay?
I see you okay.
Okay, well, that part's not too important. Well, thanks for that introduction and the kind of the long form introduction. I want to thank you all for inviting me to speak today. You know, I love speaking I love being with you all, really. That's the point of it. And even though we're not together physically, it's just nice to see so many familiar faces on my little iPad screen here. And some really just great connections. The San Diego crowd, so really great to see you, Bruce. I saw Jeff earlier and Sam, maybe a couple of other folks there. And then you pointed out the La Jolla connection, which is a big piece of my life and my career. And then, of course, seeing some of the other folks that I've worked with, including Brian Dixon, Ken Franklin. Ken, good to see you there. Congrats on that job, one of the best jobs in the Navy. And then Gene Doyle, who relieved me there. So really great to kind of a reunion for me, which is what it's always like coming back to the Southwest chapter of the Navy Submarine League. And it's great to be with you today. And I did want to start out, as you mentioned, and just say a couple words about Vice Admiral Nick Nicholson, who passed away here about a month ago. And I don't know if y'all have done a memorial service or anything like that for him or participated in it, but he was a big piece of my time in San Diego. And I just remember him telling the story when he was the CO of the Sargo of surfacing at the North Pole. I think it was the second ship that went under the North Pole, Nautilus being the first, and the first ship to surface at the North Pole. And just telling me about the sonar that they had, and which basically was useless up there, and how they did that. And it's just amazing story. Of course, he enlisted during World War II, with yesterday being Pearl Harbor Day being another piece of that, and just an incredible life, an incredible officer and submariner. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about Stratcom. I relieved as the U.S. Strategic Com J3 Director of Global Operations. Really an incredible title. Just makes me humbled when I see it on beside my door when I go to work every day. And it's a great job. And it is on an Air Force base. And I have to tell you, it also involves flight ops. So I am in duty involving flying. I'm the director of, the head of the Looking Glass mission, which is the Airborne Emergency Action Officer, which on the Airborne National Command Post. And so, we're the group that is ready there is an alert crew on watch today. There has been since early in the Cold War. Or an alert crew ready to go off and to do nuclear operations should that be required in a survivable manner. And so in that role, I get to fly for a week of alert duty about every other month. And that's pretty darn good, actually, for my time in to just be in an operational billet like that is really important. I work beside Admiral Richard, another great submariner, with about 150,000 soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines and civilians around the world doing the nation's strategic deterrence mission, which I'm going to talk about today. It is DoD's #1 priority. We have been doing it since the early days of the Cold War, and we're now facing a lot of challenges with the environment. That's what I'm going to focus my comments on. I'll talk a little bit about our modernization of our strategic forces, and then I just really want to get to your questions. So I'm going to try to limit my comments to no more than 30 minutes and hopefully a lot less than that, and then get to your questions. And I'm going to try to do this all at unclassified level. Well, I am going to do it at unclassified level. That may mean that I periodically have to kind of stop what I'm saying there to make sure I'm think about it and make sure I'm talking at the unclass level. Well, let me start off with making an assertion that Admiral Richard has made in several unclass fora recently, and that is that we're at the point now in the strategic environment where we have, as a nation, we've not had to seriously consider the possibility of engaging in a crisis or a conflict with another nuclear armed adversary in over 25 years, since the end of the Cold War. And for the first time in our history, we're now at a point where we have to consider deterring two near peer nuclear adversaries that may cooperate with each other. And of course, I'm talking about China and Russia. Both are increasing their reliance on nuclear weapons and rapidly expanding their capabilities. And they don't necessarily see nuclear weapons like the West does, like we do, which is a weapon of last resort. They may be willing to use nuclear weapons to obtain their objectives. And we see Russia building a lot of, sometimes they're called tactical nuclear weapons. The more correct terminology is non-treaty nuclear weapons. So things that don't apply to the treaties that we have, the START treaty being the primary one. And because of that, it may prove difficult to deter them in crisis. And I would also say that as we're looking at both of them, deterring them from nuclear use is different. So Russia deterrence is still very much like it was in the Cold War, although there are some nuances to that, and their non-treaty weapons is a big piece of that. And China is a very different country to try to deter. So that, coupled with the pace of their improvements and their capability and their capacity, really gives us a pretty big challenge. Now, our policy is pretty consistent across multiple administrations in the last 10 to 20 years, and it is still sufficient to address these threats. It's strategic deterrence. It's fundamental to all of the plans and operations that we have in the U.S. military. The big difference now that is no longer true is that the assumption that the risk of strategic deterrent failure is low is not necessarily guaranteed. What is strategic deterrent failure? That means nuclear weapons use and hostility. And so that is growing. It is still low. It is, I'm not alarmist. I'm not saying that Russia or China is itching to use a nuclear weapon in a conflict with the United States. I don't believe that to be true. But there are situations where that might prove to be appealing to either one of those. And because of that, that's causing us to really reevaluate our overall policy in each of those cases. To put it practically, for deterrence to work, we have to demonstrate the capability and the credibility in our operations and the ability to expose their vulnerabilities and impose cost on competitor strategies. That really, when you look and you see just every day in the paper, I know you guys read quite a bit, and you see the new advances that they're making, both in their capabilities as well as in their capacity for both of the countries. Russia has continued to invest in their nuclear arsenal and in their undersea forces. And China has significantly invested in their nuclear arsenal over the past years, really across the board in their military. During the Cold War, we're keenly aware of and fully prepared for the possibility of a nuclear engagement. And because we knew what the threat was, we knew what capabilities they had, we had an idea of their logic, their thought process for how they might use those and when they might use those. It was certainly a very dynamic time, a very concerning time, a very scary time, really. But because we knew the threat as it had evolved, especially toward the end of the Cold War, we felt that we possessed the necessary readiness, tactics, techniques, procedures to deter the adversary. And we're really ready to lean forward to do that. Over the past 30 years, we've modified our posture of our forces necessarily and appropriately, focusing more on capabilities-based development and planning because there was no existential threat. But now post-Cold War experience are kind of running out, and we are really operating in new uncontested domains of deterrence. Our adversaries took advantage of that period, and now they're emboldened to increase their aggressive behavior, expand their capabilities, and reconsider their tactics and strategies. I'm going to talk just a little bit about the two major competitors here, and then I'll talk about our modernization. So for Russia, we still consider them the pacing threat in strategic deterrence because of the number of weapons and warheads they have. And they have aggressively engaged in conventional and advanced development capabilities and nuclear modernization efforts. And they're pretty close to being finished with those. So they at the end of the Cold War, they were broke in the nuclear world. And since then, they have been investing. They have not been investing huge sums of money, but they've been investing almost solely in their nuclear and their undersea. And they have brought forth some pretty good capability in what we would call classical strategic deterrence or classical nuclear operations, both undersea, on the land, and in the air, as well as a whole panoply of really unique weapons that could be nuclear capable. And again, at unclassified level, you folks have seen some of these things talked about in the newspapers over the last couple of years. And those really worry us. Their policy has gotten looser, I believe, over the last few years. They continue to violate international law and fail to follow through on their political commitments, which undermines the rules-based order and our collective influence within that structure. In the most recent Russian policy statement, their rhetoric on nuclear deterrence and employment, Russia expanded the number of circumstances under which they would consider the use of nuclear weapons. And now we believe this to be the case for a long time, but now they're actually saying it publicly. And again, although this is somewhat distressing, I'm not saying that the nuclear Armageddon with Russia is nigh. It's not. I don't believe it is. And it's not a surprise that they are here. But this is where we find ourselves with Russia now. If you look at China, they're also the growing threat. So if we say Russia's the pacing nuclear threat, we would say China is the growing nuclear threat. Sometimes we sugarcoat that and talk about China as a competitor or as a near peer. But increasingly, the rhetoric, both from the U.S. toward China and for China toward the U.S., has become increasingly vitriolic and aggressive. And so I think that they are becoming a threat. We used to consider them as a lesser included case on the nuclear side, saying, well, if we can take care of Russia, we can definitely take care of China. But they're on a trajectory to be a strategic, meaning nuclear peer by the end of this decade. And they have shown that they always go faster than we think they will. And so we just really have to pay attention to what they're doing more than what they're saying. Their investment in the nuclear triad, they're about to finish building that out to get the third leg, the air leg of the triad. And their policies lack transparency and their multi-domain capability. And that's what really causes us concern is we don't understand their logic for potential nuclear weapons use nearly as well as we understood Russia's logic at the end of the Cold War. They have a no first use policy. That's what they say. And that they have a minimum deterrence strategy, but it seems inconsistent that that they are claiming this minimum deterrence strategy while they're continuing to build very sophisticated command and control capabilities and fully develop their triad of nuclear forces. If they really were interested in a minimum deterrent, it seems like they would build a certain number of SSBNs and maybe some ground mobile missiles, and they would stop there. But they're not stopping there. They are building a lot of delivery systems as well as a lot of warheads. They also have a very active espionage network and are a threat there, especially in stealing of technology. And so that really makes us concerned, and we are taking precautions in our nuclear acquisition programs to try to minimize our threat vectors from that threat. So if you look at the growing nuclear stockpile there, their growing number of systems, also their advancements in cyber and in space technology and in the threatening aspects that they are able to produce in both of those domains, I believe we have no choice but to view China as a threat. North Korea, Iran, and those trajectories, you're probably as up to speed as I am on North Korea. They continue their pursuit of nuclear weapons and ballistic missile technology, usually using it as to try to get leverage in negotiations. They've been pretty quiet here for a while. I would expect that, and they're right now they're really dealing a lot with COVID in that country. I would expect that they'll probably get back to their old tricks before too long. Iran seems to have quieted down a little bit since the election. I think that maybe they're kind of biding their time to see if the administration turns over, that what will be kind of the JICPOA, and what will be the actions going forward on that. But they are still concerns, and they still have the ability to divert our attention from other things that we would rather be focused on. So bottom line is now we have nearly 2 near peer competitors on the nuclear side. Russia certainly one, China growing to be one, and we have some significant detractors, North Korea and Iran, for the nuclear mission and strategic deterrence. So again, I don't believe that means that we're on a path for conflict with anyone. And in China's particular case, there's a great book written by Graham Allison, a Harvard professor, called Thucydides' Trap, that really goes into detail about it's not inevitable that we're going to go to war with China. And I believe that it is not inevitable. But the trajectories that we're on right now are not necessarily healthy for preventing conflict. And so that's a pretty sobering picture. And now I'll turn and I'll highlight where we are with our own forces and in the modernization. At Stratcom, one of our most important missions, or the most important mission, is to deter strategic attack. That's both nuclear attack as well as non-nuclear attack across the continuum of conflict. And the way we typically describe that is competition. That's what we're in day to day, meaning we're out there to compete on the world stage for world power, the elements of power, diplomatic power, economic power, military power, and now increasingly information power, the information domain being a huge piece of that. So we're in competition with the other world powers there. The next step up is crisis, and that could be like if there's a North Korean provocation, that might put us into crisis where we have an increased military posture in a certain area of the world, and then combat or conflict being the very high end across the spectrum. And for the strategic deterrence to work, we have to have capabilities that can produce effects across that whole spectrum. So while the nuclear capabilities we have, the submarines, the aircraft, the ICBMs, while those are used in the very highest end of conflict or combat, we need to use their effects, their potential effects, to be able to shape the environment in the lowest end, in the competition end. And that's really what strategic deterrence is about. So you have to have a combat-ready force, ready for the highest end of conflict, in order to be able to convince your adversary that they don't want to come out of competition, that they're a lot better off, that we all are a lot better off staying in the competition arena rather than progressing into crisis or conflict. For us, we have always stated that this ability, these capabilities, come from our possessing a triad, and that together the triad really produces the best strategic deterrent effect. And although I'm talking to a group of submariners, and I'm a submariner, and I'm going to talk about submarines a little bit more detail, as a Stratcom member and as a strategic deterrent, I guess you would call me, I don't know if I'm an expert or not, but I'm at least an operator on the strategic deterrent scale. I have to say that a triad is very important. And it's very important to talk about that now, because as we are looking to modernize, to recapitalize all 3 legs of the triad, each of those costs a lot of money, and there's a lot of discussion. There was a lot of discussion in the last year about, do we still need 3 legs of a triad? My answer is yes, we do. Why do we need 3 legs? Well, the ICBMs are the most responsive leg. So we have a whole bunch of ICBMs on alert every day out there. They're ready to go. They can be retargeted and launched and hit a target, very quickly. So they provide the day-to-day basis of deterrence. The other thing that I like about ICBMs is they're in the middle of our country. And so if anybody wants to do something to our ICBMs to try to prevent our using them, then their intentions are pretty clear. It helps us to discern intent. The second leg of importance, the submarine leg. We have most of our warheads in the submarine leg because this is a survivable leg, and that it's a very flexible leg too. It's not as visible as the ICBM or the bomber legs, hopefully. And what we can do with it, we typically don't say very much at all about it. So it's not great for messaging, but it's kind of the foundation of deterrence. You could take out some of the ICBMs, you could take out maybe a lot of the bombers, and you're still going to force us to use our submarine sea-based deterrent, and we have really significant capabilities in that leg. And then the bomber leg is important for messaging. It also is important to give us some very unique capabilities that we have. I won't go into any detail on those, but the bomber leg and now Stratcom has COCOM over all of the bombers for the Air Force, and so we actually run conventional missions for the Joint Force, not for the Air Force, but for the Joint Force, as well as the nuclear missions. We have a good set of bombers set aside for the nuclear mission that are assigned to us for that, but we're also running a lot of conventional missions. And one of the things that we've done since I've been here in 6 months is we've really been pushing forward on bomber task force operations, and that's flying conventional missions in different places in the world, because we find that we can get a lot of strategic deterrent out of that. So when we fly a conventional mission of B-52s from Minot, North Dakota, and we fly to the South China Sea with those, that's a lesson to the Chinese and to the Russians that we could just as easily be reaching out with nuclear bombers or bombers that had nuclear weapons on them in that case. So that is a strategic deterrent message without having to actually move any strategic weapons. So that's a good piece. So anyway, the triad, essential, 3 pieces of it. The other part of the triad is, I call it the triad plus, is the nuclear command, control, and communications part of it. I'll go into a little bit more detail on that in a minute. That's also a very important part, and that is a part that is being recapitalized as well. But before I do into that, I will go into each of the legs of the triad on the recapitalization program. And I will start out with the Ohio class submarine. Most of you know that the Ohio classes SSBNs have been extended. The service life was extended up to about 42 years, which is longer than any other submarine that we've had in our history. And the fact that we're able to do that is a great testimony, a testament to probably some of you out there that are listening in here about the design, the build, the operation, the sustainment, the maintenance of those submarines over their lifetime to give us the ability, the flexibility as a nation to be able to do that. And then that is allowing us to, the time to bring the Columbia class submarine on a line without any gap in service. The other legs of the triad are similar. So the Minuteman ICBMs have been on alert for about 40 years past their intended service life. They're going to be recapitalized with a ground-based strategic deterrent. And then the bombers, although B-2s are relatively new, they're still pretty old. And then the B-52s have flown for a long time. And, we are still going to fly the B-52s, even though we're building a new strategic bomber, the B-21. There's still a plan for B-52s to fly around because of the huge payload that they can carry around. So, the B-52s have been flying for about 75 years, and they may very well get to 100 years before we completely retire all of them. the B-52s that are flying today have been refurbished. So they're basically new aircraft. So every piece on them have been replaced probably multiple times, but they still are that same old design. And that's one of the things that we really need to get on with is more stealth in our bomber force in general, including our nuclear bomber force. So we have been extending these strategic platforms for really since the end of the Cold War, and taking that as a peace dividend. And now we have to pay the price to get them updated, recapitalized, in order that we can maintain the capability that they provide to us. And we're also running out of time. So each of these has a very tight timeline. And the Columbia class, I think most of you are aware, we expect the first one to come online around 2030. And then soon after that, we'll be up to 1 a year production. And that's dovetailed with the decommissioning of the Ohio class SSBNs. And there's just not a lot of margin left there. You know, we're doing what we can to get some more margin out. We may be able to get a little bit more margin out, a year, 2 years, something like that. But it's pretty close. And so we have really got to get on with this recapitalization program. Admiral Richard has the entire strategic enterprise focused on these recapitalization programs. And he is in a meeting with the folks in DC with the SecDef once a quarter on this topic, and then with the SecDef staff about once a month or so in some form or fashion to talk about the recapitalization and the timeline, and just to make sure that things are on track. And the good news is that over the last year, as Bruce mentioned, I was in 97 before I came to this job, that the Secretary of Defense really has listened, and the President has listened, and they have put it in the budget that most of these programs are pretty well funded. That, you know, they're not exactly fully funded, but they are funded well enough to deliver the capability that we need in the time we need. And so that just has to continue on. We can't take any more holidays from fully funding these programs as they come along. Now, just to talk another minute or so about nuclear command control and communications. This part of it also is decades old technology. In some aspects, that's somewhat comforting because a lot of these systems are very durable, reliable, very hard to break into with cyber because they don't touch a lot of cyber. But then some of the new systems are very cyber heavy. And so those, we are really concerned with the security and the surety as we bring those on board. In 2018, the Secretary of Defense directed the commander of U.S. Strategic Command to assume an additional duty called the NC3 Enterprise Lead. And what that did is that gave, now it's Admiral Richard, it was General Hyten at the time, but now Admiral Richard has responsibilities to set requirements for and advise the SecDef on the investments to make the systems more robust and survivable against physical, electromagnetic, and cyber attacks. And in that time frame, Stratcom has established a NC3 Enterprise Center, the NEC. It's always great when you have an acronym inside of an acronym, to act as the portfolio manager to coordinate these requirements and investments. So it's very unique amongst all of the combatant commands that Stratcom actually sets the requirements for service provided systems in NC3. It makes a lot of sense since that the services, mainly the Air Force and the Navy in this case, generally have different contractors, different system requirements. And by putting Stratcom in charge of the requirements, that helps to really solidify them and help the systems to be able to talk to each other and be more coherent with each other. He also has some requirements, responsibilities in science and technology and bringing the R&D together to bring new systems together. At Stratcom, we've actually created a next generation division that's looking at these future concepts and developing the requirements for them. And this is integral to the joint all-domain C2 effort, the JAD C2 effort that you may have heard about. That's a big communications effort to do kind of the same thing across the whole joint force. So last part here is how do we shape the environment going forward? Well, the first part is we have to acknowledge that our adversaries have blurred the lines between conventional conflict and potential nuclear use. That directly challenges the strategy, doctrine, and advantages that we've held as a nation and as an alliance, speaking mainly about NATO. We can no longer expect those adversaries to act within these long-standing self-imposed constraints. And so we're working to revise the strategic deterrent strategy for the 21st century. And again, another good news story is that in the last 5 years or so, there's been a lot of discussion, really detailed discussion about strategic deterrence and our strategy as a national strategy for strategic deterrence. And there have been a lot of people in the think tanks and in the other places that have really gotten to starting to talk about this again and to write on this again. The basic equation hasn't changed. We need to be able to deny our adversary their aim and be able to impose a cost that's greater than what they seek. Within that spectrum of violence, again, there are different needs for different adversaries at different times across the spectrum of conflict. So the last thought I will leave you with is shaping future deterrence, and that's something that we're actively pursuing now as well. And what I mean by that is being able to put ourselves in the best position so that going forward in 5 years from now, that our situation out there in the world is still strong enough that we're able to threaten to impose those costs and expose those vulnerabilities to our most pressing adversaries of Russia and China. And with that, I'll stop and love to take any questions that you have.
Hey, if you've got some questions, go ahead and put them in. Let's see. Tom, can you see the questions on the chat?
I cannot. I just have you on my pictures.
Well then, Jeff, Jeff Fishback, why don't you unmute and ask your question?
Yes, thank you, Admiral. Good presentation and a lot of good stuff there. Good seeing you again. The question I had was, how does the Space Force integrate with Stratcom?
Hey, Jeff, that's a great, very good question and pertinent. And it's great to see you again also. Again, I wish I could be out there with you all. Your beard's looking great, man. Keep it up. The Space Force was kind of born out of Stratcom in a very similar manner that Cybercom was born out of Stratcom about 5 years ago. And so the answer to your question is really complicated. I'm gonna try to say it concisely. We are just now getting to the point for Cybercom where they can really do everything a combatant command needs to do on their own two legs. Okay, so that really this year they have really come into full force. Now they've been 90% of FOC for 4 years. Okay, Spacecom has gotten through most of that first year. They're about to get through that. We are still helping them in a lot of ways. There are still, first of all, we gave them a lot of people. So when Spacecom was born, they took a lot of folks at Stratcom that were doing the space job, which is appropriate, absolutely appropriate to do that. So the function was space, so they got those folks. There's still about 150 people that come to work, well, normally would come to work in a non-COVID environment in the Stratcom headquarters that now report to U.S. Space Command. And so we still have a very large space presence in our headquarters. And a lot of those people have dual functions with Stratcom. And so right now they're performing comms continuity for Stratcom while they're performing the similar function for Spacecom. So there's still a little bit of, it's not dual hatting. They work for Spacecom. Spacecom gives them their orders. It's just convenient that they're able to do what they were doing for us in their same job while they're here, rather than living in Spacecom and doing it, from Colorado, doing it there. But overall, it's going to take a few years before it's all sorted out. But I think they're on a good trajectory. I've been in a few different meetings with Spacecom since I've been in my job here, and they're really starting to take off in areas like the working spectrum issues, jamming issues, and working the overall constellation support to the warfighter. Now, it's in my mind, Spacecom, there's really two aspects to it. There's the effects that they provide that support the joint force, and that's still going to be a joint force provided, and I'll call it a commodity, where Spacecom is a supporting command. So for example, for the Joint Electromagnetic Spectrum Operations, actually Stratcom still has the lead for that. In the future, I think Spacecom will, but that once they get fully manned and outfitted and are ready to take it, I think they'll get that. But in another domain, and that is in the space domain. So that is another domain of operations. In the space domain, they're the supported commander. So if there is an activity that's required to protect our constellations in space or to do offensive actions in space, Spacecom is in command of that, and the rest of us are supporting of that. So again, it's a transitional process. They just now have really gotten full up where they have a full-time J8 organization to work their issues with acquisition and programming. They've had a J3 organization. It's pretty active, pretty busy, but it was dual-hatted, and so now it's starting to be its own particular entity in their operations. Their J5 organization has been very busy, and from the very start with a lot of policy issues back with DC. So they're off to a good start. I'd say that they're probably at the 80 to 90% FOC, and a lot more work to be done for them to really take over all of the aspects of all of the missions that they own.
Thanks.
Tom,
Yes, sir.
something you said really woke me up. Did you say 2030 for the first Columbia on patrol?
2030 for the first Columbia on patrol. Actually, it may be about on or about. I can't say any particular dates, but that's about right. Yep.
Thank you.
Hey, Jim,
Yeah.
Brian, you had a question. You want to go ahead and unmute and ask your question?
Sure, Admiral. Are you planning any kind of tenders for the Columbia class to make it? Otherwise, you've just got 2 targets to get if you want to take them out. Kings Bay and Bangor, right?
Right. So, that's why we have a certain number of submarines at sea at all times, so that you can take Kings Bay and Bangor out, but we will still have overwhelming capability from the sea in those cases. But the tenders, that is a sensitive issue. Maybe it's a tender issue. Sorry, I couldn't help on that. But we the Navy definitely want some submarine tenders out there and about, so that we can use them both for the fast attacks as well as the SSBNs in that kind of a time frame. I don't know exactly where it stands. When I left the Pentagon back in July, where we were working on a common hull ship that could be used for other purposes. So, think a large cargo ship that could be outfitted as a submarine tender. And since we would make this ship for more purposes than just a submarine tender, we could make 10 of them or 20 of them and get a discount on the volume of it, and then outfit it as a submarine tender. I don't know where that stands. I know that I was unsuccessful in getting it fully funded in the FY22 budget. Which obviously has not gone to Congress yet, but has gone out of OSD. They're still obviously working on the FY21 budget now up there in Congress. Anyway, we do want some more tenders. I think we want them more for the theater fight than for the SSBNs, but they certainly would give us a nice backstop for the SSBNs. And if I could back up to John Smith's question. I think I mentioned this when I was out there visiting with y'all last February. I had the opportunity to stand on the reactor compartment of the USS Columbia last time I was at EB at Quonset Point, and I can tell you it's real and it's really progressing well, but it is going to take a while to get that first one fully developed and built and get it in the water, get it all tested out and get it out on patrol. So maybe a while for that. Okay.
Charlie, you had a question? You want to go ahead and ask that? Do we have?
Good afternoon, Admiral. Great to see you.
Hey, Charlie. Good to see you.
Incidentally, the Century of Submarines in San Diego is still it's on the hit parade, and people really do still enjoy going through that. So thank you for starting that effort. The question is, how are they doing with the Minuteman forces? Retention, acquisition, and readiness.
Yeah, Charlie, that's a really good question. They're doing okay. You know, I think you're referring to about 5 years or so ago, maybe it was 7 years ago, there was a cheating scandal out there, and you know the nuclear review looked into it, and there was a lot of ugliness that was revealed out there. So I have you know, several missileers that work directly for me, and then on the plane that I mentioned that I fly, we have one of the missileers up with us on the plane. I think it's a lot better now. The morale is a lot better. And I think that that's a reflection of some of the changes they made in the career path, also in just the duty rotation that the missileers stand. And then also it certainly doesn't hurt to have a new system on its way. And it's going to be a while before the new system gets there, you know, but I think that they're getting some attention that they really deserve. Those folks still do an incredible lift on their alert patrols, if you will. You know, unlike a submarine alert patrol, it's not for 100 days in a row. It's typically for, you know, less than a week. It could be a single day, could be 5 days, could be 7 days. But they go out to their locations and they stand alert in a launch capsule for a period of time. And then they go back home, and then they turn around and do it again the next day, kind of thing. So it's a pretty big grind on them. The force themselves is the material condition is good in the force. Again, it's old. It needs to be replaced. It needs to be recapitalized. But the missiles, it's one of the first things I check. It is the first thing I check in the morning is the readiness of the ICBM force. The second thing I check is the readiness of the SSBN force. And the third thing I check is the readiness of the bomber force. And the last thing I check is the readiness of the nuclear command and control and communications system. And so I can tell you that the ICBM force is pretty healthy out there. Did that answer your specific question, Charlie? Okay.
Michael Erickson had a question that ties into that a little bit. Michael?
Yeah, thanks. Good afternoon, Admiral. Hey, I was just wondering, you had mentioned Joint All-Domain Command and Control, or JADC2, and integrating NC3 with that. What do you see that are some of the biggest challenges with integrating NC3 into the larger DoD JADC2 construct?
And that's a very sophisticated question, Michael. Thank you. And at the unclassified level, what I would be able to say is JADC2 is not a system. And if you're familiar with it, I know you know that already, but it's not a specific system. It's a system of systems or collection of systems that gets an objective done. And the way I think about it, and I'm not an expert on it, but the way I think about it is there's a transport layer that uses a lot of the comm systems that we have now to be able to transport information, communicate information. And then there's a data layer and how do the data interacts. And then there's a security layer on top of that. So it's layers upon layers of systems that do transport or do data and then do security of data. So kind of three classes of system on top of all of this equipment. NC3 is just going to be integral part of that. There will be some specific systems that'll be NC3 systems, but those will probably be of the security and the data type of systems. They'll ride on top of the transport layer for everything else. So there's not going to specifically be, more than likely, some specific systems. Some comm systems that we have are specifically designed for NC3, and those will probably continue. But a lot of the NC3 will just ride in the network, the cloud, if you will, of the different systems that ride on JADC2, and they'll have their own internal security and data mechanisms so that nobody else can break in and see that. And so I think the big picture answer to your question is NC3 will ride on or be part of the JADC2 system. It's not going to be a separate system. There may be very specific aspects of NC3, like the authorization of nuclear use kind of assets, that are held apart from the JADC2. But generally, the JADC2 transport layer is what everything's going to ride on.
Thanks, sir.
Tom, have we seen any sophisticated efforts to hack into our command and control system?
Well, John, I personally haven't. I've read about some in the papers, but yeah, I would say, answering this at an unclassified level, not really is what I would say. And the other thing I'd tell you is that we try doing that to ourselves too. Okay, so that we could see where the vulnerabilities are. And we still feel pretty secure. Now, again, as I alluded to earlier, a lot of our systems, there's a human in the loop in a lot of our systems, and that kind of combination makes it difficult for somebody to really get in and get control of nuclear weapons. That is a consideration for future NC3 systems that we're wrestling with right now, that we're thinking about. But no, I feel pretty good about the security of our nuclear systems at the moment.
Thank you.
Dick Alburn, I think you had a question.
Yes, sir. Admiral, one of the more significant burdens that I'm sure you would rather not have is the necessary budgetary planning that goes on from year to year. That's hard enough under normal years. Looking forward to this upcoming change of administration, what are your concerns?
Yeah, well, in my last job, I was a lot more concerned and attached to it than I am in the current job. But from the Stratcom perspective, our big concern is the continuity of the programming, the funding, and then the continuity of the budget. So being in a continuing resolution doesn't help matters. Now, the good news is that we were concerned about that, and we being the whole strategic enterprise. And so we were able to get anomalies in the budget because when you do a continuing resolution, you're not allowed to start any new items in the budget because they haven't been approved. So you can just continue items that were funded last year at the same level they were funded last year, but you can't start any new items. So for example, this year, the FY21 budget that's in a continuing resolution had a lot of money in it to start the Columbia class, full construction of the Columbia class submarine. But we foresaw that might happen. And so we went to Congress and we worked with them to get an anomaly, meaning that Congress basically passed a mini bill for just that Columbia funding, to increase the Columbia funding to the number that we needed to get it going in 21. And so that happened. And the same thing happened with the ground-based strategic deterrent as well as the bomber too. So for the nuclear side, and those are the only things that happens for, is for the nuclear strategic forces. And so that, they're the highest priority in the DoD. And so we're able to keep those projects online as they're ramping up into full production.
Thank you.
Okay. See, I have a question. So the aircraft you're flying in, is it the Navy's E6 or is it the Air Force's E4?
It is the Navy E6B Mercury is the name of the aircraft. And they're basically a 707 airframe, so 4-engine jet, way overpowered plane that can stay aloft for a long period of time. And it's a pretty good mission. We've been flying that mission on the E6B since the middle of the 70s.
Now, you were also on that aircraft the last time you were there, right? Are you doing the same job or?
That one is, yeah. So that flight mission is we have a rotation as the head person on the plane. It's a flag officer watch bill. And I'm responsible for that watch bill, so I get to stay and watch when I want to. It's always good to be the one who signs the watch bill. But it's a great mission, and it's great for me. It's like standing a watch on the submarine. I mean, I'm on there with 25 other souls, and we have a mission to do. We might fly a 6-hour, 8-hour mission, something like that. And while you're there, you're just focused on doing the mission. So very tactical level, and but being with the team, and some of the team are, there's enlisted and officers in the team. Some of them are really young. We have some operators that are they're typically routinely one or two folks on the plane are not 21 yet, and boy, it's encouraging and energizing to stand, watch, and just interact with those folks.
Now you're not airborne the whole time, are you? Do you touch down at times at places?
Well, the plane is not in typically we will do a couple periods of continuous airborne operations a year where we will have heel to toe planes, but they're different planes. But usually we'll do an alert period where where we're on the ground with the jet, and we just have to be ready to go get airborne very quickly to do our mission. And then while we're on those alert periods, we'll fly missions for training. So we fly a pretty good bit for training.
Okay. At one time, Stratcom had the cyber mission. Did all that work get transferred to Cybercom, and you're out of the cyber warfare business then entirely now?
Yes, but the part of the mission that Cybercom does is to provide services to the COCOM. So we still have some cyber elements at our COCOM, at Stratcom, but so does UCOM, so does PACOM. And so those cyber elements are doing the specific cyber business for U.S. Strategic Command in my case. So we do still have some cyber teams that are doing, mainly defensive kind of missions, but they're also our liaison for offensive kind of missions that we might need. So we have some cyber people on the staff. They work for me in the J3. But so do all the other COCOMs. That's how Cybercom does business. Since they're I hate to call them on the defensive side anyway, they are a provider, a force provider. They provide a service of the defensive operations. The way they do that is by putting teams at each of the COCOMs so that the teams can become very familiar with what's going on at this specific COCOM. And those teams can pull in other assets, other resources from Cybercom to do bigger things.
Tom, a bit of history. 42 years ago, when I was assigned out there, we visited Grand Forks, North Dakota in February. The snow was so high that every corner was a four-way stop because it was piled so high. I remember a Minuteman squadron commander meeting with us and asking, how do you deal with the wives when you're deployed for such periods of time? I get calls from wives when the people in the silo are extended over 48 hours wanting me to pick up bread and milk for them.
Yeah.
Always have to remember our families and what they've done to support us.
That's absolutely right, John. And the places we have missiles, it's not Charleston, South Carolina. It's not San Diego, California. They're out in the middle of nowhere, and it's cold and all of them. In fact, the missileers like to call Offutt, the ones that get sent here are very happy because they call it the Tropic of the Missile Force down here in Offutt. And so it is cold in most of those places. But I agree 100% what you just said. The families are so important to all of the missions. Each leg of the triad has different challenges there with the families, but you just can't do it. You can't do it without the people, and the people can't do it without the support of their families. So still vitally important to the mission.
Great. Are there any other last questions before we let the Admiral escape? No, a round of applause for the Admiral. I think you did a great presentation. Thank you very much. Admiral Ishee's spoken so many times, we've run out of gifts to give him. Normally we would give the mains all, but he helped pull it together and wrote some of the articles. And I think last time you were here in February, you took about 10 copies of it home. So we did find another book, the Navy in San Diego, that will be getting in the mail to you this week.
Well, thanks, Bruce. Y'all don't need to send me anything, but because I love doing this, but I'd be very interested in that book. So
you might enjoy that one.
All right.
So again, thanks, Admiral, for agreeing to speak again. Just a quick comment. Our next meeting will be Tuesday, January 12th. It'll continue to be a Zoom meeting, and hopefully we'll have Subpac, where Admiral Blake Converse is our speaker. So I hope everybody enjoys their holiday season and has as good a Christmas as you can under California lockdown if you're here or wherever you happen to be. So take care, and if anybody wants to stay around and chit chat a little bit after the meeting, feel free to do that because we'll leave the website up for a little bit.